So we had a request for Auriel. I realized I haven't done Auriel, so we're going to talk about Auriel so that we can figure out what's going to be one of the more optimal builds, some of the scenarios where you might go other talents, and how to kind of get the most out of Auriel, because Auriel's a little tricky. I think she's a healer that you don't normally want to early pick, right? As a Tracer player, I'm not a big fan of playing with Auriel. I don't get many heals. Your team generally needs to have a pretty standard composition. I want to get into some of the particulars before we get into the talents. Because she's an AoE healer, you sometimes are going to suffer versus single target damage. Luckily, your heal's on a very short cooldown of only 4 seconds, but that means you got to fill up your energy bar, and there's some ways to work around that. But there's a lot of discipline that comes with Auriel on when do I heal, when do I not heal? Am I going to be able to get energy? Am I not going to be able to get energy? So there's a few variables that kind of have to come into play. They did buff Auriel to where she's not as dependent on a battery, as in somebody that's going to do enough damage to give you hope, because you need to have your crown on somebody. So putting your crown on the likes of a Vala, Sylvanas, a Cassia, a Lunara, things like that. Somebody that's going to have a Gul'dan that's going to have a lot of output in terms of sustained damage. I don't necessarily want to put this on mages, like maybe a Kal'Tha. Sure, I might get some burst damage at times, but at skill shots that I'm not always going to get. Kal'Thazad even. So they kind of put some of the power into Auriel's hands, but not all of it, right? So you want to make sure that you're playing with that. So you want to have at least one battery, ideally. Not only that, but you also want to make sure that, you know, your team's not going to be a team that's Ceratol over here, Tracer over here, and then you get to heal a Diablo that's diving, and then all of a sudden it's just you and a Vala over here. Those heroes don't always have self-healing. Diablo kind of does, but you're kind of in a weird spot. That's not to say Auriel can't work in those situations. It's just much more difficult. So a couple of things with that, right? You want to get your trait onto somebody. You want to make sure and you hit your abilities. Getting your E to stun onto stuff. Having the discipline on your W is very important. And then making sure if your team's not always grouping up, to communicate like group up, I've got heals, or ping that you've got your heal, like alt click and then ping an area. Normally a help area is how I like to do it. So you have to play around a lot of variables with Auriel, which is why she's not always in all the games. So that does make it a little difficult. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can kind of amplify your value. So your Q, all of the level 1 talents I think are viable to a degree, right? So depending on the enemy team is probably going to make me determine what I'm going to pick at level 1. Cast speed is really good. This is very safe. You can never really go wrong with this. This helps you guarantee your Q does more damage in the middle than it does on the outside, meaning the more damage you do, the more energy you get, making it a very good talent as a result. This is also very good against the likes of a Kerrigan, an Alarak, a Garrosh, heroes that will punish you for standing still for any period of time. Against the Diablo, he has a point and click charge, so I'm not normally as worried, but I don't normally want to be standing still against people that can counter people that stand still. And yes, there's a big difference in that half second that you're basically getting there. So keeping that in mind, this is the safest pick to go with. I actually really dislike increasing clarity. Your Q damage is not exactly going to be where you're getting there. This is probably the talent that I like the least. Except for Searing Light. The other one is reduces the cooldown of Sacred Sweep by 3 seconds for each enemy hero hit. Now, if I'm playing against a front line that doesn't have a lot of CC, but I'm going to be hitting 2 to 3 targets, or even a Samuro, now all of a sudden my Q is going to get mega value. That means I can generate more energy more quickly, as opposed to waiting on my teammates. So getting a couple people, getting a couple Qs out can be the difference between a full hope bar and not a full hope bar, thus making it much easier to heal versus much more difficult. So I think those are kind of the top 2 talents. Now, when do you pick Searing Light, right? Like if this helps me if I hit more heroes, and this helps me if there's people in front of me, then they kind of are the same thing. And Searing Light is just like, well, I'm going to do more damage. I'm going to tell you right now, Searing Light's not that great. Now, there's a couple of things about Searing Light is the damage you do comes right back, right? So there are situations where if you're playing with a death ball composition on your side, as well as you're going into a lot of areas, you can add some bonus damage. But if you're going in, let's say I have a much more aggressive comp that I have 3 melee that are all going in, and my solo back here can kind of move forward, and they're protected and I'm kind of protected, but now we can be more aggressive. You can still get cooldown here. You can still get stuff here. You could even go into quest talent at that point, but now Searing Light also can just instantly generate back your healing bar as well. So there's different ways to play around that. I don't think there's any like really OP talent at level 1. I do think that cast speed can be the difference between like getting Garrosh comboed and not getting Garrosh comboed. Just depends on whether you have a beefy front line that can actually save you if needed. Just don't be a liability. This helps you not be a liability. It's very safe. This is really good because it gives more energy throughput, which is more damage output, and it's generally better than trying to get stacking damage, which is not your forte as Auriel. So I'm not a big fan of this. And then Searing Light, kind of like that really reserved backup option. I actually really don't like this talent. I would probably never recommend anybody pick Searing Light unless you know what you're doing. You've been playing Auriel a long time. You've tested this maybe in ARAMs or something. At ARAMs, it's kind of cheating because it's actually pretty fun there. Level 4, there's really only one talent I like here. So when it comes to your E's can help you peel. This can help you peel that Garrosh. It can help you peel damage off of your team. It can save you. It can interrupt mosh pit, right? Hopefully as an Auriel, you're not the only mosh interrupt because that would be a little weird. But if that is the case, you have to sit on your E. And if that's the case, then you can go Majestic Span. But let's assume that you actually have somebody on your team, right? Most of the time you're using your E, it's for two purposes. Knocking back people to save somebody, or hitting somebody into the wall, forcing a stun, or both, right? Like you can punish aggressive people that are diving your team and hit them with this and you get the damage. It's going to knock them back further, which gives you more peel potential. But furthermore, it's going to make it easier to hit into walls because you get the extra distance on the stun. It could also be counterintuitive if you knock somebody out of your own teammate's damage. At that point, probably messed up. I didn't like the stacking talent at 1, but the one at level 4 is actually really good. You're not going to just be going out there. With my Q, I'm going out there. I'm trying to get maximum value and get as much hope. It's much less reliable that I'm going to get that damage, right? So at level 4, though, you're going to get up to 60 damage. And after you stun 6 heroes, that's an additional 200. Increase this damage bonus to 250, right? That's a tremendous amount of damage for a healer that's going to have a knockback on a 12-second cooldown. So now you can stun somebody into the wall. It's going to give you burst damage, and it's also going to help fill your hope bar a lot easier. And getting the extra knockback range is already a huge plus on this, but the fact that you can get the bonus damage and the stacks on this, I think it makes it easy to finish. It makes it very reliable in terms of peeling and or, hey, you're near me, boom, I'm going to hit you. Now, this is a little bit different in open maps like Hanamura, things like that, where you don't normally have that. Your team's normally spread out in those maps, so Auriel's not as great, right? But either way, repeated defense is really good. If there's other situations that you're going into, I don't really like heavy burden. I get where it's coming from, but the burst damage and the knockback is normally better. And the radius here, just not that great, right? Level 7. Now, this is kind of a big topic because you got to decide, when do I pick globes versus when do I pick something else? It kind of depends on the map. Not only that, but it can also play into whatever 16 talent you pick. If I anticipate that I'm on a map like Tomb of the Spider Queen, a map where I know I'm going to be near minions a lot, maybe even Volskaya, Dragonshire, things that Auriel's going to have like choke points they can fight in well, but also be fighting near minions in waves. Auriel now gets a big step up. You're going to have more areas to stun. You're going to have different ways to get globes. They're going to be near you. If I'm in Cursed Hollow, that's going to be much more difficult. Those globes don't come very often in the middle of the map outside of the lanes. So Glimmer of Hope can be good on maps where there's going to be plentiful globes. It can be pretty bad on maps like Cursed Hollow, or if for whatever reason you're playing this on Hanamura, it can be very difficult there too. It can, like, Auriel can work on Hanamura, but you just got to have the right team, right? So if I'm going that, Glimmer of Hope can be really good on certain maps. If I'm not going that, then there's a different path that I'm going to take this. The Empathic Link, Auriel stores 25% of damage taken by allies with Bestow Hope. So if I have a tank that's going to be absorbing a lot of damage, they're on the front line, this can be good. I do like, however, for those of you that watch my videos, know that I actually really like active healers and people that can play at ranged and actively auto attack. This increases the energy stored from Auriel's basic attacks to 120% of the damage against heroes and 55% of of the damage against non-heroes, meaning that if you are able and you're not going against like triple blind, Energized Cord is actually really good, and it helps benefit your auto attack speed or your buffs, your activity that you're using. Energized Cord is kind of like that. All right, there's no globes, or I don't feel comfortable with globes. I'm going to go Energized Cord. Now, if you are going Glimmer of Hope, this is very important that you have to have the foresight and a little bit of like the intuitiveness of saying, all right, there's a globe right here, or there can potentially be a globe there if I kill this, or if I wait for their globe to convert to mine or neutral. I want to be able to see if I can save my heal. So later in the game, getting 100% energy and then using this, I'm 75% energy immediately after, and then I just go and I cast again 4 seconds later. That can be massive healing, like just astronomically large healing, to where you're basically like casting mini ancestrals. So that's kind of how that works. Your W will glow when Glimmer of Hope is active, when you have a globe on that. If not, that's your indicator that you don't have it. Else, Energized Cord. So here's something that earlier this year, Resurrect was busted. It was overbuffed and it was ridiculous to play. I absolutely hated the fact that they buffed it the way that they did. Bringing somebody back at 100% life after a 3-second delay was just way too busted. I can't believe that they did that. So they've nerfed it, brought it back a little bit more normal. You still bring them back to 100% life, but when is it better to bring somebody back at 100% versus Crystal Aegis? Most of the time it's Crystal Aegis. 5 seconds is an eternity in a team fight, an absolute eternity in a team fight. So if somebody dies and I'm trying to resurrect them, those 5 seconds generally aren't going well. Think about all the times you get 1 kill in a fight and how well you're able to snowball that. Bringing somebody back says that they might be able to turn this over. I don't think Resurrect is bad. I just think that 5 seconds is a very long time in a team fight. 3 seconds was too short. If they wanted to go 4 seconds, we'll see what happens. Crystal Aegis on a 60-second cooldown versus a 100-second cooldown. Crystal Aegis means it's available for every single team fight. Now, there's a few things about Crystal Aegis that you have to keep in mind, right? Like if I see somebody getting absolutely CC trained, this technically is kind of like a pre-cleanse to where like I'm just going to save them before they take 100% damage. They're 40%, I just go ahead and Crystal Aegis them because I see a whole bunch more damage coming. Boom, there we go. I see Pyroblast coming. Boom, there we go. I'm trading out normally longer heroics or big CC trains for a 60-second cooldown, which is actually okay. So the other thing about this is that how do you time your healing, right? A good team will be able to be like, all right, Crystal Aegis, boom, because everybody picks Sulfurous Smash as Ragnaros, right? That used to be the play for those of you that haven't been around for a few years. We'll get to that in a second. Thank you so much. So there's a bar underneath it. You can see when it's coming. Now, ideally, if you have a big heal, you would like to put that on first, Crystal Aegis, and then 2 seconds after this wears off, you'll be able to heal again. Now, Crystal Aegis does do damage to those people that are caught in. It's not a huge amount of damage, but that damage does come back in the way of hope. So getting a heal out, and it kind of depends on the scenario, right? If I don't have any hope, then why am I going to press W? If I have a full bar of hope, I ideally like to press W and then Crystal Aegis. If you think you're going to get a W and a Crystal Aegis off, sometimes that's not going to happen. They're just going to get blown up before you ever heal them and get those 2 buttons off. That's where the big burst damage CC train comes in. You have to play around that idea of there's a 2 second buffer. If I heal Aegis, there's like a 2 second buffer before I can heal again off of that damage. So if I'm going into Aegis first, then I'm going to watch that bar and I'm going to try and time my heal perfectly and hope that I get enough energy off of that explosion to fill up that and heal them coming out. It can be very tough. Also, your E can save people or create distance and be able to save you there. There's no guarantee that it's going to work, but this is the much safer bet. Resurrect, I'm just not a big fan of this. Maybe for a Cho'Gall, but even then, normally a save button is going to be better than a bring you back button. 13, all of these are good. Blinding Flash is phenomenal versus auto attack teams. You've got an Illidan, you've got different people that are going to be on top of you. This is actually a 2 second blind is insane. not super hard to hit the center of it. When you have somebody that's much closer, it's much harder. And if you did go, now keep this in mind, I should have probably addressed this at the beginning. If I'm playing versus an Illidan, an Artanis, auto attack Diablo right now is super popular. I will go Swift Sweep with the anticipation that I'm going Blinding Flash at 13. I should have said that at level 1 and I didn't. But what that does is it helps you guarantee the center hit more than anything. The center hit gives you guaranteed damage. Hitting this also guarantees that you're going to have a blind. So if you're playing against like an auto attack Diablo, which is really popular and probably going to be the pick, you don't know if it's an auto attack Diablo at level 1, obviously. But the anticipation that I'm going to be playing against auto attack heroes that I need to try and counter. The sweep speed plus blinding flash is almost a guaranteed hit. And it means a 2-second blind on a priority target. I get the bonus damage, which is cool because it gives me energy. I get the guaranteed blind, almost guaranteed blind because it's faster. These are things you should have the foresight for. This is just normally better in general. Like there's no doubt about it. Converging Force, it's not terrible. This can help you interrupt stuff. It doesn't interrupt. It's a push, right? So it's not going to necessarily interrupt anything if it moves it, but it can mean that the outer area can push people in, thus meaning that you're going to maybe hit the center. It doesn't just push them all the way in, like that'd be too crazy. But it can mean the difference between repositioning and helping set up different things. I think this is an okay one to help maybe guarantee that middle strike. It's not easy. It doesn't, if you hit them on the outside, it's not going to push them all the way to the middle. They got to be closer to the middle. You get hit by the middle. It's kind of weird. Piercing Lash can be very good against dive heavy teams. You don't necessarily guarantee the wall stuns, but this can help you peel 2 people as opposed to 1. So there's a few different things that can help there. It hits all enemy heroes in a line, reducing the cooldown by 2 seconds for each hero hit, which means you have more peel capabilities. This is more of a situational one. I do like this on certain maps where I know I can also be aggressive and help combo off my team. Going to level 4. I think Blinding Flash is just going to be the more normal, more reliable, most picked one. Both of these can be kind of situational. So I would say that kind of learn to assess where you're at. Blinding Flash is never bad. There's almost always 1 to 2 auto attack heroes on the other team. So getting that and potentially going with Swift Sweep at 1 is where it's at. Level 16. If I went Glimmer of Hope at level 7, the odds of me going Reservoir of Hope goes up a lot. Like, that actually means that I can pick this at level 16 much more reliably. Having 6 to 8 stacks as Auriel is an insane amount of bonus healing. On a map like Tomb of the Spider Queen, those maps where there's going to be an abundance of globes, means that might be the combo. And I know that going into the map, that this is what I'm playing for. Post 16, I can actually put out group ancestral heals as Auriel as long as I'm utilizing my globes and my W correctly. I get the globe, I press W, I'm at 75 energy, I get another globe, or I'm there and I press W again, even if it's like kind of back to back, gives me enough time to get that energy. Now, it's easy to say, but it's not always easy to do. On more open maps or less reliable globe maps, both Will of Heaven and Wrath of Heaven are good. If I'm on Tomb, I'm probably going Reservoir. Other maps, I'm going to have to deliberate a little bit. More open maps like Cursed Hollow, Hanamura, Alterac, I'm probably not going to go into that. So I start to look at other options like Will of Heaven and Wrath of Heaven. This generally is pretty easy to decide by 16 who's the one that's been carrying the fights or who's going to be carrying the fights. If I'm playing with a Lunara or a Vala, I'm probably going to go Will of Heaven. If I'm going with a Gul'dan, I'm probably going to go Wrath of Heaven. It's not hard to figure out which one I'm going to go with. This kind of depends on, look, if I'm on a map with globes, I'll probably go Reservoir and Will of Hope. If not, then I'm going to go whichever person is carrying the energy load the most, whoever I'm crowning the most, that I know that I can keep alive and is going to have reliable damage. I'm going to pick whichever one accordingly. You can figure that out on your own. Level 16. Now, I say this because I really think there's only one pick here. Shield of Hope is just really good. This is a 60-second cooldown. This is like having a second heroic. Activate to grant all nearby allied heroes a shield for 3 seconds equal to 50% of the amount of health they are missing. It can be very good, or this can be very bad depending on what your situation looks like and who you're facing. Shield of Hope is what can help you siege up on core. It's what can help you end games. It's what can save you in the middle of the most desperate team fight possible at the end of a game. If I know my team's just getting smashed in a lot of these situations, Shield of Hope can be absolutely insane and game changing. This can be like a second heroic almost. If the situation hasn't really presented itself for this to be right, then you still have to wait. It's not going to be bad. Now, if you pick Angelic Flight, you're memeing. Don't do that. As far as the heroics go, if you went Crystal Aegis, when Crystal Aegis expires, you get 75 armor for 5 seconds. That means when somebody comes out of that, going back to the original thought process with Crystal Aegis, and the reason why this isn't normally picked is that Crystal Aegis, you don't normally want to wait for somebody to be at 5% health and then hope you get that heal off and they don't get that extra 5% damage in at the same time you're getting that heal. It can happen, and it's pretty common that that could happen. But 75 armor is probably not going to save that target. Now, if I'm getting the Crystal Aegis on a 20 to 40% health target, I'm saving them before they die, and I'm not waiting until they're absolutely 1% away from dying, and I'm hoping that I have a W after this, then normally Crystal Aegising somebody at 20 to 40% health, getting enough energy in that time, and then pressing heal immediately after is probably better than 75 armor on a single target. Having shield for my entire team for a potentially desperate moment is really, really good. Crystal Aegis is a 60-second cooldown. This is a 60-second cooldown. So I can also just shield that target and then Crystal Aegis them or shield them coming out of it. And guess what? It's like the exact same thing, except my whole team gets it. You know what I'm saying? So getting that big shield on a target coming out of that is the exact same as getting 75 armor. Light speed is a little more interesting. If I did go Resurrect, which I don't think it's the worst talent, I'm just not a big fan of it on 5 seconds. Getting this so it's back again. Remember, 100-second cooldown. For anybody that's ever heard me talk about this, getting heroic upgrades that are for cooldowns of heroic upgrades, unless it's the new ETC one, at level 20, normally your team fights are really long. Or there's a long period of time between them. Normally trying to get from 100 seconds down to, I don't know, 50 seconds. 100 seconds is a long time. Don't get me wrong. Normally fights are between 60 to 80 seconds unless it's post level 20 where the death timers are over a minute. You probably don't need this. The movement speed's a little wonky. But Shield of Hope, I think, is the better option. Diamond Resolve, I'm not a big fan of that. The heroic upgrades just, they don't really appeal to me very well. There is a time and a place. You can argue all day that there's, but this, yes, there's always going to be a place for those two heroics. And if you're arguing that, then you already know where to pick them, or you're picking them and you don't know why, and hopefully you think about it a little bit more going forward. But that's Auriel. Again, I think that for Auriel, it's really about like maps where you can get stun value. Your blinds can work really well. Picking a level 1 talent with the foresight of what you're going at 13 can be very good. Picking your level 7 talent with the foresight of what you're going at 16 can be really good. It can be the difference between having 10 to 20,000 more healing and things like that. So you always have to keep that in mind with an Auriel on how you're playing it, why you're playing it, and am I in the right composition? Because that's probably the most important part. If you're not in the right composition and you've got a Tracer over here, a Zeratul over here, and an ETC that's sliding in, and you've got a Sylvanas over here, and it's just you two, the odds of you healing more than 2 people at a time, not very good. Not very good. So you always want to be careful with what compositions you pick it in, which is why you don't normally see an early Auriel pick. And if you do early pick Auriel, let's hope your team builds around it, or they're already showing their picks on what they're going to do. So I think Auriel is pretty balanced compared to where she was, and then over buffed. I think she's in a pretty good spot. Being more of a niche hero, I think, fits her style. We don't want her to be an every game healer. I think right now she's in an okay spot. Maybe a minor buff, but I think we're pretty good right now with Auriel. So if you're looking to, for another healer to try out, this